So part 3 on the genetics lab has to do with human blood types. You have genes for markers on your red blood cells. That's why I drew them in red. And what we're talking about to start with is what they call the ABO group, the things we determine with letters. A, B, AB, and O. And it turns out that as far as your markers are concerned, the base of the marker is the same. And what the different alleles do is they change the very end of the marker. They actually put a little string of sugars on it, but it makes it different, and it makes it so that your immune system can detect which markers are which. If you have A blood, then your immune system recognizes A. If you put B blood in there, it'll go, this doesn't belong here, and you'll develop antibodies to the B. So to make this simple, we're going to say that on your A blood, you have A antigens. Now, it's not an accident that I'm not attaching them to all the little blue things, because they don't actually wind up on every single one of your bases. And in B, you got Bs. Now, remember how genetics works. You have pairs of alleles. If you have AB blood, that means you have an A allele that's going to make A markers here, and a B allele that's going to make B markers. You're not going to make AB markers. You're going to make a mix of those. So some of them will be A's, and some of them will be B's. And depending on the moods of your genetics, is sometimes you'll overproduce one and underproduce the other. AB people are the most commonly mistyped blood type, where they check it pretty quickly, and you can get a drop that looks more like A than B, or a drop that looks more like B than A. So now O, they don't change the end of the base. Is that the base is just the base? There's nothing else attached to the end of it. And now we get to the importance of not every one of these bases having an adjustment on it. If you have, now I'm not talking genetics, I'm talking antibodies and how your body reacts to things. But if you have O blood, I have A blood, if you give me O blood, my immune system recognizes these bases because I have some of those sticking out of my blood cells. And it goes, oh, okay, that belongs to us. It's fine, leave it alone. So O is the universal donor. You can give it to anybody, and everybody's immune system kind of recognizes it as belonging there. If you have AB blood, you can throw basically anything at it because your immune system's seen all of this stuff. And so AB blood is the universal acceptor. And so you can give somebody with AB. Now, I haven't talked about Rh factors, positives and negatives yet. We will get to that. But right now, we're talking about ABOs. Okay, I have A blood. I gotta have an A allele. If you have B blood, you have to have a B allele. If you have AB blood, you have to have an A and a B allele. Now, if I have A blood, what's my second allele? I could have an A there, but if I had an allele changing my markers to A, but another allele that goes, well, if you're going to use me, we're not doing anything. You're still going to have a bunch of A markers on your blood. Your blood's going to register as A. Same thing happens over here. Notice I'm writing the O as lowercase. The only way you can have O blood is to not have an allele that's going to put an A or a B marker out there. So if you have O blood, you got to have O. Now, what they call Rh factors, because it was discovered in rhesus monkeys, is a different marker, different gene on a different chromosome. So I'm going to use a different color. Just a protein that's either there or it's not. So this is Rh positive, because there's markers there. Is that this is Rh negative, because there's no little green lines on it. There's no Rh markers. Now, the way that we do the lab, we represent the ABO alleles with letters, and we represent the Rh alleles as positives and negatives. So an Rh positive is going to have the markers. So it needs an allele that will make markers. Now, there could be two of them, but there could just be one of them. It's still going to have markers on it. Rh positive is dominant, Rh negative is recessive. The only way you have Rh negative is if this is the only allele that you've got. So if you have AB negative blood, we know just exactly what alleles you have. You have an A and a B and two negatives. If you have O negative blood, we know what alleles you've got. You've got two O's and two negatives. Everything else, we're not really sure. There's a number of different alleles that could give you every other type of blood. Because you're never going to go to the Red Cross and have them tell you you have AA blood or AO blood. They'll just tell you you have A. And depending on, you can figure it out depending on parenting and other kinds of things. But this is not part of your blood type. You have A positive or B positive or A negative or B negative. Nobody goes and it gets a little Red Cross card that says, I have AO. Keep that in mind, because I will ask you questions about this later on the next exam. So our first question on part 3, this is part 3, is we have two parents. One of them has B positive blood and the other one has A negative blood. And the first question is, so what alleles could be up here? Well, we know the B parent's got to have a B and the A parent's got to have an A. Now, to have B blood, there could be two B's here, but there also could be a B hiding an O. To have A blood, there could be two A's there, but there also could be an A hiding an O. So right away, we have two possibilities for each parent. Now, for RHs, we know there's a positive here, but there can't be a positive in the negative parent, so those are two negatives. So right there, we've got all the possibilities. There's only two possibilities that are going to give us that A negative, but that's possible in the B person, but hiding a negative is also possible. So if you have B positive blood, there's 4 different mixes of alleles you could have, and you don't know what you've got until you figure it out. And there are ways to figure it out that go to the second question. So the question for number 2, and I'm going to kind of squeeze it in here so I can get all of them down. Could these two parents have a kid with AB positive blood? And the question is, if they can, how does it happen? And if they can't, why can't they? Right? Because it's more than just a yes or no. It's a yes, why, no, why question. Well, we know the A can come from this parent and the B can come from this parent. We know a positive can come from this parent, but you can't get a positive over here. So there would have to be a negative here. That didn't change the blood type, does it? Is that still AB positive blood? It just happens to have a hidden negative under the positive. Now, if they had a kid with AB positive blood, they would know from this parent that there was a hidden negative under there, because the negative is the only thing to go on this side. So this is how you puzzle out the hidden parts, is you look at parentage and kids and grandparents, and you can figure out what's not showing. Sometimes even if it doesn't show anywhere. I'll explain that in a minute. Second kid possible, or is it possible? Well, we've already done the positive blood. Now, we know that the A can come from here. Now the question is, what's in that spot that could have come from here that wouldn't give us this, wouldn't give us AB blood? Well, it's got to be something the A can cover up. So it's got to be an O. Which means that one had to have come from this parent. Which means that's no longer a possibility for that parent. So here's a situation where there's no O actually showing in the blood type here. But we know from the mixture, it's got to be there. And we know from the mixture, it's got to be hidden over here as well. So that tells us that the B parent isn't two Bs, it's a B and an O. And so we've reduced those 4 possibilities down to just 2. The next kid, B negative. Well, the only way you get negative blood is to get 2 negatives together. And negative from here is real easy to figure. Negative from here has to come from one of the 2 mixes that has negatives. Now, if they'd already had this kid, and they had this kid, that tells you the B parent doesn't have 2 positives. We already know the B parent's got a hidden negative. And so these 2 kids together reduce these 4 possibilities down to just 1. We know the B parent's got an O next to the B and a negative next to the positive. Then the question is, what came from the A parent here? It can't be an A or give you AB blood, the order doesn't matter. So there's got to be something hidden here. That could come from here, but it can't come from there. Here's the thing. If these 2 parents had these 2 kids, an A positive and a B negative kid, then each parent has now reduced the odds, the possibilities of its mixes down to just 1 mix for the B and 1 mix for the A. That's very commonly what happens. Now, the last thing here, D, you're going to do on your own, is that it's the blood type for the kid is O negative. And you have to decide, could this mix, and forget the eliminated ones, but just this mix in general, could it possibly produce an O negative kid? And then you got to fill in the alleles and figure out where the alleles came from and that sort of thing. But it's a yes Y or a no Y answer. Don't forget it. Because it's part of a question, people tend to sometimes forget that they were supposed to do it. Now, if you're looking to get child support from a guy who says, that's not my kid, you can run DNA tests, match the bars up. But DNA testing is a fairly recent technology. The best you could do for many, many, many years was to use what little was known about genetics, and that included blood types. So the next question has to do with an old court case involving blood types. So the woman had O negative blood. We don't know for sure who the dad is. We know who she thinks it is, who she's brought into court. But we know that the kids got B negative blood. So now we have to figure out what's going on. Well, in order to have O blood, what alleles do you have to have? You need an O, but you can't hide a B or an A with it. You got to have 2 O's. The same thing with negative blood. If you got negative blood, you got to have 2 negative alleles. If there's no question that this is mom and that's, this is the kid and this is mom, then the kid's got a hidden O. Which means that The B and one of those negatives had to have come from dad. And the question that's in front of the court is, well, this guy that she's bringing in has AB positive blood. Is there a B there? Absolutely, there's a B there. Is there a negative? Ooh, could be hiding under the positive. So this is a possibility. AB positive negative is still AB positive blood. And so this guy could be the father. It doesn't really show that he's the father, which is why they like DNA testing. But what it sometimes did was it would eliminate people. They'd come in and go, well, it doesn't work. I can't be the father. The blood types don't work. And that's your next question. What blood types should dad not have? Which basically comes down to what blood types wouldn't give you that B, because positive or negative could give you the second negative, right? There could be a hidden negative. But we know the B came from dad. Give me blood types that would not have supplied a B. That one you're doing on your own. And the next question you're doing on your own. Take a look at your sheet. And what you're going to do is fill out 3 members of the family. 3 members of the family. Me, my wife, and my son. I have A positive blood, I already mentioned that. My wife has B positive blood, which she does. And my son has A positive blood. And what you're trying to figure out is what are all the alleles that we could all have. Now, you're not going to eliminate us down to just one allele each, but you are going to eliminate possibilities. And don't assume, because my son and I have the same blood type, that we have the same possibilities. I'll tell you right now, we don't. So just set it, easiest way to do that is set up all the mixes that could happen and then start to cross off the ones that don't make sense and eliminate those. And I will tell you that if you're gonna make a mistake, you're much more likely to mess up my wife's possibilities than mine or my son's. There is a bonus question. My daughter has never liked the fact that she's not in this question. And she goes, why am I not in the question? And my first answer to her is, Steph, you're adopted, so it's genetics. And she goes, yeah, but the thing is, it would still work. You could ask the question and they could answer the question with my blood type, like I was a biological daughter. And she's right, is that there's nothing about the mixes that says she could not be the biological daughter. But I don't really want you to be able to reduce all of us down to just one mix of alleles, the way that we did with that first couple, is I want a couple of possibilities for everybody. And if you knew Steph's blood type, it would eliminate me down to one possibility, and my wife down to one possibility, and my son down to one possibility, and Steph down to one possibility. And that's your clue. If you can figure that out, tell me what Steph's blood type is that would have that effect on that question that you just answered. That is it for part 3.